ago, I was working on a team, lots of creativity, ideas, and dreams. As the list of great and hopeful possibilities grew, I felt keenly the stabbing awareness of feeling outside the excitement, outside of the plans, outside of the people who would carry these projects forward. It was almost as if I wasn't there. My other responsibilities made me a bit more pragmatic and less able to see the possible. Later that day, I couldn't hold back a few tears, so I took a walk outside. And as the tears washed down my face and my heart was filled with a little bit of resentment, I remember at last turning to God in the seclusion of that walk. And with one great determined cry, I laid my hurting heart before him and said, "Take anything, everything, God, but give me you." The answer to the question of why is it so hard to remember God and to feel his presence all the time, not just in prayer, goes back to the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve were created, they lived in a wonderful space. They beheld God in themselves. They beheld God face to face. They prayed continually to God. Adam and Eve praised and glorified their Creator ceaselessly, says Dorotheus of Gaza. They lived in a permanent contemplation of God, cultivating divine thoughts in their soul. They beheld God in every being and in himself. Their soul was so pure that it was like a mirror, and they could contemplate God within them. They enjoyed the vision of God face to face. Adam really abode in God. He spoke directly to God with all boldness. He lived a life without anxiety, impulse, irrational madness, and gluttony or illness. He possessed an integrity to his faculties. His soul's impulses were balanced according to the virtues and not the passions. But through original sin, through that moment when they listened to the serpent and took the apple, they set themselves on a different road to achieving the goal of their life. They missed the goal intended by their nature, which was directing their whole being to God and opening up all their faculties to God's grace. And instead, they decided to seek it out on their own. You know, when the serpent said to Eve, like, "Oh, so all the trees in the forest here in the garden, you can eat of any of these trees?" And she said, "Well, all of them except for that one." And he said, "Well, why can't you eat that one?" And she said, "Well, the Lord said we can't eat that, and the moment we did eat it, we would die." And he said, "Really now? Oh, you won't die. If you eat that tree, you will become like God." So, is there something that God isn't telling us? Is something he's hiding from us? From that moment on, when their vision of God was kind of clouded over by their, hey, I can get something better for myself, their reason took over, and it took over in a way that sought themselves in themselves and not themselves in God. So after the fall, that inner heart, that sanctuary, that inner eye, that spiritual eye of the heart left the heart, and it became identified with the content of our thoughts and our reasonings. That inner eye that saw God in the garden became blinded. And as a result, their soul was fragmented and distracted and went in a spiral downward to increasing pain and suffering. And so that is what we experience now. We don't experience the vision of God face to face, the boldly speaking to God, the endless contemplation. We have to ask, why is it so hard to remember God and to feel His presence? So, what is this inner eye of the heart that we're talking about? The inner eye of the heart is referred to as the nous. It's that unwavering stability of the heart in God. It's the eye of the soul. It's not reason. Our monkey mind, our thoughts, our analysis, but it's the mind in the heart, buried far from the body senses. It's an abyss of wisdom that sees everything with the mind of God. We could call it an experience of unknowing that transcends human knowledge, but it's something other than human knowledge. To find it, we have to leave behind imagination, opinion, and thoughts. And we need these things in our adult life, in the world. But there is another way of knowing that I think we all have tasted at some point in our life. It was a deep wisdom that could see deeply into a person, a situation, or event, and know with the heart of God what was true. It's the apex of our soul that knows the mysteries of God. And to find it requires an unsleeping watchfulness. That's why at the beginning of the first presentation, we started with just stopping and beginning to notice, to watch, and to see. Where are our thoughts? What's going on with our mind? Are we so anxious or tied up or blocked that we can't drop down into the depths of our soul as we did in the second presentation? The inner sanctuary of our heart is where we can have an untroubled response in the midst of great hardships. The eye of our soul is like a fire in our heart's temple when it is free to see eternity in time. We see eternity through the temporal. But if our nous gets attracted by the beauty of what it sees, as Adam and Eve did with the apple, then our nous begins to be dominated by the passions and bound to material things. We sons and daughters of Adam and Eve have forgotten what our authentic nature is. So after heart work, you will be more attentive to the inner urgings which sabotage your deeper desires for wholeness and holiness. You will be more sensitive to your heart, to God, and to others. You will be more watchful of what blocks you from experiencing the joy, love, and mercy you want for yourself or wish to show to others. You will be able to develop a gradually deeper spiritual life along a time-honored path that is indicated in the scriptures and by the fathers. And you will be able to live your life and encounter difficulties with greater confidence and serenity, using the tools you learn in HeartWork throughout your life. And so I invite you, before the next presentation, to take some time and to begin to notice when your mind is analyzing, figuring out, planning, and when there's some deeper heart space that knows things from some place deep within, some place where God lives. God knows and God is.